Welcome, Charles.
Happy to be here, Lasse. Thank you.
So good to be here with you. I messaged you yesterday, and luckily you had time. We live in the same community. Maybe we should just say that to the listeners.
Yeah, temporarily. We're here for a month.
I see you as a kind of a modern philosopher, a thinker, and the reason why I want to talk to you is because you have some incredible insights on how we should live our lives. How would you describe yourself in short? Like, who is Charles Eisenstein?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I could use the word philosopher, although that carries connotations that, for one thing, that I'm steeped in academic philosophy and the history of thought, which I'm not really. I have a little bit of education in classical philosophy, but not a whole lot. And I guess also philosopher, I don't know, it seems like a little bit arrogant to call oneself a philosopher. But I guess I do spend a lot of my time thinking and writing about the deep questions that philosophers investigate. So it might be accurate. I've been a writer and a speaker for most of my career.
Yeah, I've heard you speak. You're an incredible speaker.
Thank you.
But I also, like, when I do these talks, I like to ask myself the question, like, why? Like, why do we need to talk? Like, why are we connected, you and I? And
maybe we'll find that out.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know. No, but I like to play the assumption game. Do you know that game?
No.
It's, I guess I'm cheating a little bit since you and we have spoken on a private level. So there's some things that I kind of know, but the assumption game is basically my assumptions about you.
Okay.
And then it kind of taps into one of my patterns. And a lot of people's patterns, I guess. Like, we assume stuff about each other. And in my experience, these assumptions that I have are very often not accurate.
That's a good game. Miguel Ruiz, one of his 4 principles is don't assume. But if you in a way that everybody assumes, so it's actually probably a good first step to be transparent about your assumptions. So I like this game.
Yeah. I mean, the key steps for me into being an authentic person is, like, one of them is welcome everything, try and be open and assume nothing. And then some of the things that are sometimes hard is revealing how you feel, revealing your experience, and then owning that experience, like owning what you feel. And then the last one is honoring yourself and honoring the other person. But assuming nothing is probably the one that I struggle with the most, I think, because my brain, it takes me into that zone, So 4 pieces, and I'll say them all, and then you can comment in the end. So the first one is pureness and revolution. I believe that we both have a wish to transform. We don't think the system is about tweaking. We think that it might be a better thing to revolutionize, kind of rethink the whole thing. Number 2 is purpose and meaning. The way I see you and me is that we are both seekers of meaning, something greater beyond the normal recipe of success. Number 3, roots in spirituality. I myself was raised in a Christian home. I don't consider myself Christian today, but it's definitely the foundation of my spirituality and my value system. And I sense that spirituality has sensed your relationship to the world as well. And then 4, a struggle and growth. So many of us humans have a profound struggle or pain that we come through. And I get the feeling that you, like myself, have endured some pain to get where you are today. How does those 4 assumptions sit with you?
The one that is coming up strongest, though, is the third one, spiritual background. I'm actually an apostate to my birth religion. My birth religion was atheism, radical scientific materialism. My father especially was a vociferous atheist, ridiculed anything that smacked of God or spirituality or anything that was not scientifically explainable. I didn't recognize that as a religion until much later. It seemed the antithesis of religion. But in fact, that worldview that we call science is a religion. It has every feature of a religion. It has metaphysical principles that are just assumed. For example, the principle of objectivity, the controllability of variables, the repeatability of experiments, the idea that everything real can be measured. And if it's not measurable, then it's not real. These are all metaphysical assumptions, not physical assumptions. Like other religions, it also tells us where we came from and what's real and how the world works. It even has rituals by which to attain truth called experiments. It has a priesthood. And I could go down the line in many, many ways. It resembles especially the Catholic Church, which is why I used the word apostate or heretic. You can get excommunicated when your funding gets cut off. So there's just, so many ways that it's like a religion. Every religion has a way to access fundamental truth, and it has its particular virtues. The religion of science, its core essential virtue is humility, because at its core it says, we do not know, so we shall ask. That's what an experiment is. And so the good scientist is a humble person. Unfortunately, most religions, when they become institutionalized, they become the opposite of their core assumptions. And Christianity, which you mentioned, is an example of that. The fundamental essence of Christianity is non-judgment, forgiveness. And, Christianity is turned into maybe the most judgmental religion. But I like to say, let us not throw out the baby with the bathwater and recognize, like you say, you're not religious now. I feel like I actually believe in every religion, not from an outside place of, I should respect and tolerate, but actually awestruck by the insights and the effect on consciousness that each religion can have. And I like to visit them. I like to immerse in that way of seeing and in that way of being, because there's medicine in each one. There's a gift in each one. And many people today, actually, I just read that after many decades of decline, Christianity now is increasing again in America. But it's a different Christianity than the intolerant evangelical fundamentalism of my childhood. What we might call spiritual principles are infusing Christianity and Islam and Hinduism. Something is happening in the world right now, maybe the revolution that you're speaking of.
I think that a lot of people feel the urge and the need to believe something right now because the world is so chaotic. And I wouldn't say I'm not religious. I'm just not connected to that one specific religion. I believe that all religions have a beautiful message. If we read that in a contemporary context, instead of reading it like it was 1,000 years ago, then it can lead to some very beautiful thoughts and conversations. The thing that I feel right now is that people are so disconnected that maybe this is their search for something real. I know that you speak a lot about how we are disconnected right now and that we are moving away from our purpose, actually. How do you see that? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, I think one reason for the resurgence of traditional religions is that the kind of religion of modernity that tells us what's real and tells us who we are and the way the world is, that whole story is breaking down. It doesn't provide satisfying meaning to people anymore. It doesn't allow them to make sense of the world, and it doesn't really tell them who they are. So going along with that is But part of this breakdown is the breakdown in relationships, especially community, but also the relationships to nature. Mm-hmm. So people are so disconnected from the people around them and the plants and animals around them, and instead connected through money and technology to distant institutions, impersonal institutions filled with strangers, produce products that you then order, where you go to the store, but maybe usually order them online even. They come to your house. There's no connection there. The person who made your food or your clothing or your iPad doesn't know you. There's only one very thin thread of connection. So we don't have a community that knows us. Outside the nuclear family and a few friends, we're not really known. The stories we hear are not the stories of the people who live next door. The couple next door could be, and if you talk to someone in the generation before us, they might tell stories about the village that they grew up in, where everybody knew each other's business. You knew what everyone's kids were doing. You knew the story of everybody's parents. You knew who was fighting with their spouse. You knew who was in love, who was sleeping with somebody else, whose child was the best friend of another child. You knew everything about each other. Mm. And so because you were well known, you knew who you were too. So today, you could also add the relationships to the seeds and to the animals, to the ecology of a farm or a forest. So that's all gone now. So people don't know who they are. And that makes them susceptible to being told who they are through, it could be a religious cult, could be a political cult. People are desperate for sense and meaning and identity. Mm-hmm. So it's a time also very fertile, because this time of breakdown does allow something new to arise. And maybe one thing that you and I both do is we introduce healthy, nourishing, restorative, healing offerings of who are you? What is this world we are in? Where are we going as a species? What are we here for? These deep questions no longer have answers that are satisfying.
Yeah, I sometimes feel it's the struggle between the head and the heart, because the head is telling you a lot of things about survival, also on a social scale, like you have to be part of this online group, or you have to have a lot of followers on Instagram, or you have to do this and this and that. And while your heart is slowly disconnecting, like you are not connected to yourself. Right now, we're coming back to those 5 values I mentioned before, like to kind of honor yourself, like be within yourself. And that is super inconvenient sometimes, to kind of feel, am I where I'm supposed to be? Am I happy? And like my day to day, is that the intention that I want in my life? Am I being intentional with my feelings and with my doings in my life? And then if you go all the way into meta, I mean, we're only here, as far as we know, we're only here for, 80, 90 years if we're lucky. And if you lie on that deathbed and you haven't been intentional about what you're doing, then it's this, it's gone by so fast. That's what I read when I read like testament from hospices and stuff like that people that have been intentional have had a good life. And they've had a hard life, they've struggled, but it's because they were there. They were living. What do you think about that?
Yeah. At the end of life, it seems that it was very short. Right now, it seems like there's almost an infinity ahead of us.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'm older than you, and the older you get, the more it's put in your face that your time here is short, as first your parents and all of your older relatives die off, and then your cousins and people in your own generation start to die off. And the motivation to be intentional becomes stronger and stronger. If a young person quite naturally believes that he's going to live forever, I remember thinking that, like old age, it just seemed ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a freedom in that is proper to young people. But as you get older, then you realize that that's not true. And so you get a lot more intentional. I was thinking as you were speaking about, well, first, the heart. You mentioned the disconnect between the heart and the head. And I will relate that to intentionality, I think, because a lot of that disconnect is cultural. Our minds are immersed in a worldview that often contradicts the heart. For example, this is one of the principles of science and economics, that human beings are naturally driven to maximize self-interest. Our heart doesn't want to maximize self-interest. Our heart wants to take care of the people we love, and even total strangers. We feel compassion. Mm. Well, in other cultures, in earlier cultures that operated by the principle of gift and reciprocity, it was obvious that what was good for your neighbor or for your clansman was good for you too, because wealth was not accumulated. If you had more than you needed, you would share. If you're a good hunter, that's good for me because you're going to end up sharing it with me. And your misfortune is my misfortune too. Mm. Anytime we're all in it together, it would be a mistake to say that the best hunters or the best producers were the most highly valued. That's not true in anthropology necessarily. Anyway, when you live in a society in which more for you is more for me, then the head and the heart are not in conflict. Sometimes people say, well, you should live from the heart and not the head. But really what we want to do is to unite the heart and the head, to bring this separation back into unity. And I think that when we are able to do that, when we are able to recognize that our minds have been immersed in a story that is no longer true, that we've been essentially lied to about the fundamental nature of reality, mm-hmm. then we are able to form an intention for our lives from a unified place that doesn't require excluding the knowledge of the head or the heart. Mm-hmm. It really then comes down, for me, like this process of finding what is the intention that unlocks my full reserves of energy. It starts with desire. What do I actually want? And the process of clarifying that has been hard for me because of all of the programs about what I should want, what I think I want, what other people want me to want, what we are told about the nature of the universe, about abundance and scarcity. Like all of these things are confusing and make it very hard to actually know, okay, what do I want in this life, in this incredible opportunity of incarnation, in this good world that has so many materials for creativity. I mean, what an opportunity we have. Here's your play set. What do you want? Here's your theater. What do you want to create? It's been quite a journey for me to even recognize that what I thought I wanted wasn't what I wanted.
Yeah, that shift into intentionality is so nerve-wracking because stuff comes up and it's often not what you expect. And the thing that is also a little, I guess, vulnerable is that when you do start that intentionality, it's also inconvenient for your surroundings sometimes. Like you start saying things that they are not used to hearing, and they see you do stuff like maybe you stop drinking alcohol, maybe you take a decision about community, maybe you start working on your health. I don't know, something like that, intentionality. And that works as a mirror sometimes. Like it's a mirror for your surroundings that, hey, maybe I need to do something. And that's very inconvenient for me. But I'm curious, Charles, how do you see, like, who and what specifically is standing in the way of this movement of intentionality?
Well, I'll start by commenting on what you just said about it's inconvenient for somebody else. If we are immersed in the story, the narrative of a bunch of separate individuals in a world of other competing for limited resources, then what I do for me is very likely to come at your expense.
Mm-hmm.
However, when I understand that I'm actually not a separate being, that we are interconnected on an existential level, that in some way you're a part of me and I'm a part of you. And the cicadas out there that you might be able to hear if you're listening to this, like they're kind of in my head in some way. If they're gone, I become less. You may have experienced this if some place you loved when you were a child was cut down. You feel a loss because that was part of you. When we understand that principle, then when we say, okay, what do I really want? It automatically includes the well-being of those that we love and of all of those around us. It's not that you have to compromise and say, well, what I really want is, to drive a Maserati everywhere and make loud noises, but I'm going to restrain myself because, then I wouldn't be able to feed my children. Acknowledge that yourself includes those you love and then expands outward to include the world. And that doesn't mean that the center disappears. Okay. There's like widening circles. When you acknowledge all of those things, then that information feeds desire. And what you want changes. And that integrated information set that includes all that you love, that is the foundation of intentionality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The reason why we are here in Costa Rica is because of that intentionality. Like intentionality of being connected to each other as a family, but also connected to the nature. Like coming back to where we came from. A big part of it is something you mentioned before, the community. And this is something that I'm really curious right now to investigate on the powers of community. So how do you see community as a part of this intentional transformation that we're doing?
People yearn for community because of the distancing effects of money and technology. But community is actually a side effect of something else. It's a side effect of actually needing each other and creating something together. That's why you don't get community if you just go to the bar and consume together. You have to create together, but if you go to the pub and you sing together, which they used to do at pubs, maybe still do in some places, then you start to get community because you actually need each other to sing the song. If you're on a sports team, you need each other to win the game. If you're in a theater troupe, you need each other to put on the show. If you're hunter-gatherers living in a nomadic band, you need each other to survive. If you are medieval villagers, you need each other to create entertainment, to create dance, to create music. So you cannot have community just by, okay, we're all going to live near each other and wish that we had community. You have to have something that you are creating together. And this is where intention comes into it. What is really an intentional community? You have to create together. Mm-hmm. At the very basic level, raising our children in a beautiful way could be the purpose. Communities can work like that, except until the children grow up and they move away. So those communities don't last. But this is what I've been having conversations about in the community that we're involved in. What is the purpose that we are gathered for? We don't really have the answer yet, but to recognize that there is potentially a purpose, that that's really what we want when we are seeking community. Part of what we want is to be needed by each other, to be called into something beyond our individual selves. And that purpose, well, maybe I'll leave it at that. I'll turn it over to you for a moment.
I appreciate that. Thank you. No, I'm well, that's a bit of a cliffhanger you leave there, Charles. But I will go into something and then maybe we can come back. The way I see community is, and this is very on a large scale, like, first of all, there's the day-to-day, like we're talking about, your children are freer. They're playing with other kids in a more kind of natural way. The sharing part, potlucks, the communication. Sometimes in the normal world, you can go weeks without anyone except maybe your spouse asking you and meaning it. How are you? And here it's on a daily basis. People will ask you, how are you? They'll look into your eyes.
Real. Yep.
Yes. This is kind of a cell of 40 families. And we as a community can do something very closely here, or maybe we can inspire on social media or do podcasts like this. But when we really start changing the world is where we have more cells, like people that get inspired and they go into community. They start asking each other, how are you? What's your intention? How can we connect? How can I treat you respectfully as another human being? And how can we set aside, and like this is the thought for, like, there's so many aspects of this. There's the climate, there's wars, there's all of these things. Like, why are these things happening? So the revolution, like historically, revolutions start by two people talking. And then they talk to two people and they talk to two people. And all of a sudden we have a movement. And this is, I think, the way forward. And it might take a long time, but this is what the world needs. It actually needs that communal feeling. It needs connection. It needs intention. It needs that we start taking care of each other again. What do you think about that? And please share your cliffhanger.
Well, to return to the idea of our mythology collapsing, of our basic stories that give sense and meaning and identity collapsing, we are wanting another why, that's something that we are intending altogether, even on the level of the entire species, that infuses purpose into life. We used to have that, 50, 100 years ago. I call it the ascent of humanity. Everybody believed in the program of the conquest of nature and the rise above nature. That's why I call it ascent. And no one had any problem with the phrase conquering nature. That was a good thing. And young people aspired to be part of that grand purpose where humans rise above their biological origins, rise above the dirt and the muck, and move on into space. We just naturally saw nature as resources. There was no problem with that story. Part of that story was life is going to get better and better. It hasn't really worked. Life isn't better. You can choose your metric and make it look like it's better. But even in the most affluent places, levels of addiction and depression and mental illness and suicide and chronic disease, life is not better than it was for a hunter-gatherer. Mm. So the story's breaking down, but it used to give us a why. It used to give us a purpose. We don't have that anymore. So whether we're talking about on a community level or a personal level or the level of a nation or a species, we're desperate for a unifying purpose, something that we can sacrifice to, something we can contribute to. People like Donald Trump will revive or try to revive the old purpose because people are desperate for something. But that's really not what we're looking for. Just to speak about my country, we're not actually looking for a greatness that comes at the expense of other nations, of other people. That's not really what greatness is. That vision of greatness is only possible when you see yourself as separate. It's only possible when you think that the suffering or the poverty in Gaza or Iran or India or some other place is unrelated to yours, that you can keep it out with a wall, that we're not all connected. The consciousness that is arising today in every religion understands that that is a delusion, that we are interconnected. So whatever our new purpose is, our intention, it must include that understanding. If it's really going to enroll people in anything new, that isn't just some other reiteration of the human story that has gone on for thousands of years. And so that, I think there are three ingredients of community. One is that purpose that I mentioned, the why of us. The second is gifts. People have to be all kind of in debt to each other. Everybody owes everybody a favor. Then we're connected. If you pay for everything and settle all accounts in money, then, hey, we're done. I don't owe you, you don't owe me. We're separate. And the third ingredient is stories. You have to be telling stories about each other. Gossip is essential for a community. The shadow aspect is essentially that splits the community into the good people and the bad people, the acceptable people and the unacceptable people. The positive aspect of it is that it allows us to know each other. You know, I don't only know you by talking to you and interacting with you. I also know you through the stories I hear about you, and sometimes the conflicting stories, because none of us is perfect. You might have an experience of me of being really, maybe I'm aloof, and you might say, wow, Charles is really arrogant and aloof. But then you might hear a story from somebody else that, oh yeah, Charles is really dealing with some health problems here. His son has been feeling really shy. Oh, I thought it was just being unfriendly. I thought he didn't like us. You hear different stories from different people. You actually can know somebody. So that's why when everybody is addicted to social media or, you know, video games or something like that, you don't have community because the stories are not about the people around you anymore. So those three ingredients are necessary for a place-based community. On a national or global level, it's a little bit different. You could still have the first ingredient of a common purpose, but you need mediating structures to fulfill the other purposes. It can't just be person to person.
Right. Yeah, I've never thought about that. Community actually kills assumptions. That's interesting. The ego yells and the soul whispers. And I think that's what you have right now, is that you're talking about the development in the world right now, especially in your country, in the US. And for me, that's driven from the ego, and the ego yells, like it's really loud. And you can say, well, I hear that, so let's go with that. Where the soul is whispering to you, hey, maybe we shouldn't hate this much. Maybe we should love instead. Maybe we should take care of my neighbor. Maybe well, he's from Mexico and whatever, you know, that's the ego yelling again. Just to get back to one of your points earlier, like I'm fortunate enough to have people writing me. I'm sure you do too. These people are surprised, I would say, is probably the word. They're surprised that they did all the things they were supposed to do. They have the 2 cars, they go on the holiday, they got the job, whatever, they have a wife, they have the kids. Well, why am I not happy? Why am I feeling that void? And they're asking, like they're seriously asking, like, what can I do? So I'm curious to ask you, Charles, like, if like these people, they're so disconnected and they feel like, what is my intention? What's my why? I want to connect. What would be your advice for this person?
Well, I wouldn't give generalized advice because the advice for each person would be different. And the other thing is that person has a much more intimate view of themselves than I could ever have. But sometimes an outsider can see something that you can't see from within. And often it is about giving and receiving. That's the foundation of life. That's why we're here, to give and to receive, to create and to experience the joys of creation and all the experiences of creation. So if you're not giving towards something that you care about, then you will feel that you're not actually doing what you're supposed to do. You're not fully alive. And if you're not receiving fully, then you're also going to feel not fully alive. Now, this is not because if you have a deficit in giving or receiving, that's not because you're deluded and a bad person, stupid or ignorant or spiritually backward. Part of the situation is that we are in a situation that cuts us off from both. And therefore, part of our purpose here, on one level, our purpose here is to reconstruct fuller incarnation, fuller participation for all of us, so that we can all come more alive again and recover our aliveness. What that looks like for any individual could be completely different. For some, it might be to commit to some world-changing mission. For others, it might be that, wow, my world-changing mission has gotten in the way of me really enjoying my loved ones or doing humble acts of service that actually make me feel good. But I thought that those weren't important because I have to do something that scales. We have to scale things that don't scale, that fundamentally don't scale. We have to have people do things that are on a mass scale, quote unquote, that don't make sense from the mindset of scale. These intimate, humble, invisible acts of service toward each other and toward the world around us. So whatever this purpose is for any person, it will come from your uniqueness, the uniqueness of your gifts and wounds and capabilities, and also the uniqueness of your situation in life. So fully accepting, fully acknowledging and recognizing all of that will give you clarity about your purpose and make your purpose unique as you are.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like, a lot of these people, they don't think they're enough.
Yeah.
And you are enough. And you can, I think that's what keeps a lot of people from their why and from going on this journey, is they think it's complicated. Sometimes it's not complicated. Sometimes it's actually just an act of service or expressing love, prioritizing your kids, eating healthier, stop drinking, maybe. I don't know. Like it could be so simple. Maybe reach out to your mother today. Like, give her a ring. Ask her and mean it. How do you feel?
And again, we can't make a formula out of it. For some people, maybe avoiding something by saying, well, I can't do this, I can't do that because of my kids or because of my cat. I've known people who will not travel. They're not available for anything because of their cat. So the true wise advice for one person might be the opposite of somebody else. And that's why I say it depends on the uniqueness of your total situation.
Right. But I mean, maybe the answer is love. sometimes I dive into that idea that maybe the intention of the world is actually just love. It covers a variety of things, and maybe that's it. How do you feel about that?
It's hard to disagree with that.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
You know,
Go completely counter on that.
yeah, but you know, for myself, I don't always have the clarity about.
Let's say the answer is love. How do we integrate that instead of just having it as an emotion? Like, how do we integrate love in our lives?
Yeah, you said love is the answer, but I'm not really sure what the question is. And I think that a lot of times coming to clarity, it comes from landing on the right question. You know, like you mentioned before, you know, a political reference to, you know, Mexican immigrants and things like that. When you look into the complexity of the situation, it's not always easy to know what love would do. You know, is it loving to have an open border that is managed by drug cartels? Okay. Or to even ask a deeper question, this would go for immigration to the United States or to Europe. What are the conditions that cause immigration? If you make life miserable somewhere else, and then also try to keep the people from fleeing that other place, then you're setting up a conflict that has no good answer. So if you only ask the question, should we let immigrants in or not? That's already the wrong question. You're already in a trap that is going to cause whatever answer you come up with, it's going to actually cause harm. There is no good answer. And so we have this political division with both sides thinking that the other side is deluded and hateful. And in fact, both sides are wrong. It's like, you know, if you and I were in a room and we were locked in a cell and we're given not enough food and the heat is cranked up and it's really uncomfortable and it's not only food for ourselves, but for our families, and we start fighting. We took more than your share. We have a big argument about it. And each of us blames the other for being a terrible person and selfish and greedy. What are we not asking about? Why are we in this room to begin with? Who's benefiting from that? How did that happen? So sometimes ideas of love and compassion can distract from asking the bigger questions that ultimately love and compassion really do want to ask. And so much of our political division today is caused by that. People are so quick to return to assumptions, to impose assumptions on the other side, to write them off, to categorize them as subhuman in some way, like lacking in basic intelligence and moral sense. A lot of people believe that about half the country in Europe too.
Yeah, I think that's probably what's holding us back a little bit, is that I struggle with that search for meaning and purpose and connection and intention. Like, to keep that pure is sometimes difficult because it's not pure. Like, life is a struggle. Life is dirty sometimes, you know, and the ego I have is great for survival, but it's kind of dangerous when it takes the wheel for me. And I think a lot of people feel like that. So the search for meaning in this life, like, how do we keep that pure? And is it even supposed to be pure?
The search for meaning is a stage. It's the temporary costume on something that's much deeper than just meaning. And when people find that deeper thing, which they often do during the death process, they may not be able to put it into words. Maybe they can, but they found something that isn't about, okay, here's what it all means. they might put it into words. They might say, oh, it's the whole time it was all love, all about love. But that doesn't, it might not come to the level of explanation. You know, we would like to be able to narrate every misfortune and triumph of our lives in something that makes sense, to make sense of it all. But that is actually colored by an impulse to control things. I want to make the mystery of life, I want to reduce it to something that I can tell a story about, that I can understand. And it's not a bad thing to weave those stories, but you have to understand that just like an assumption about another person, none of those will encompass all of the truth. And when you get too hung up on a certain story about yourself, then you're going to become blind to other things about yourself. If you get, for example, too hung up on the story of, you know, I'm a starseed from the Pleiades, you know, or I am a human design manifesting generator with this open channel and that another thing. All of these things can be revealing. Okay. I don't mean to ridicule people who believe that they are a starseed from the Pleiades at all, but that is not all of you. That can be, you can sit, it's the same as a religion, actually. You know, it will unlock understanding about yourself. But if you get too immersed in that, if you forget that any meaning that we could put on something is smaller than the total mystery of it, you'll get lost. Maybe then you occupy that story and eventually you grow out of it. And maybe you even have to forget that there's anything else. But I think many people, I'll just say this, if my words resonate with you, it might mean that whatever story, whatever meaning, whatever belief system that you had been in is reaching that stage of stifling you, of no longer accommodating parts of yourself that are awakening, aspects of your being that now want expression and that just don't fit into the story you had about yourself, that society had about you, that society had about what it is to be human and what is possible in this world and why we are here. Many of us now are desperate for a new story.
Yeah. And make peace with the fact that when you do start to ask these questions, you might feel like, if you expect to feel great or expect to feel blessed, you might feel struggling. Like you might feel like the world is really difficult because you're starting to ask questions that you've never asked and that society don't want you to ask.
Yeah, and you might not find answers, or you might find answers that are a deception, that are actually just the old answers in a different form. As the old answers break down, other parts of your life might break down too. Your marriage, your job, your health, something like that. It can be a pretty messy process.
Yeah. And I think that's okay. I mean, I never go out and say, hey, quit your job, leave your wife, disown your kids, move to Costa Rica. I mean, I moved to Costa Rica because I felt connected. I just felt that was the right thing to do for me. But maybe it's not the right fit for you. Maybe what you need to do is start taking a walk in the morning. Try and reflect and just start out easy. And then things evolve from that. Charles, I really appreciate you. I really think you're a great thinker, and I've really enjoyed talking to you and just feeling, you know what I appreciate? I really appreciate that you think before you speak. You mean it. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And I'm curious, like, if the listener here, they want to dive deeper into your work, where should they start?
Well, probably the internet. Yeah. You know, Put my website in the show notes, charleseisenstein.org, YouTube channel, things like that, Instagram. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you,
Great.
my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.